This is a special report from ABC News Digital.
I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with an ABC News Digital special report. The protesters are out again in Cairo, Egypt today. One gathering in support of ousted President Mohamed Morsi, who's been charged by the interim government with espionage. The other gathering filling Tahrir Square to back military leaders. State media reporting saying that 2 people have been killed as a result of these clashes. And with the latest, we're joined now from Cairo by ABC's Molly Hunter and ABC's Dana Hughes, who is watching in Washington. But first, Molly, I want to go to you. Back to this morning, on what ground now has the military charged Morsi with espionage?
He has been charged. There has been a tremendous amount of kind of conspiracy theories around this, but he has been charged with espionage and conspiring with Hamas years ago in his jailbreak in 2011. Details are still coming out. We're still trying to figure it out. But the Muslim Brotherhood spokesman told us today that this is all fantasy. None of this is true. The truth will come out. So we're still getting to the bottom of that.
I want to talk a little bit about the nature of these pro-military demonstrations. Secular, nationalist, what essentially is their MO?
The pro-military demonstrations today were totally kind of a party atmosphere. There were patriotic songs being played. They were nationalist. There were Christian cops next to Muslims, next to secular liberals. It was largely peaceful. It was kind of a fun, festive atmosphere, very, very different than what we've seen recently. And we spoke to everyone we spoke to felt very similarly and told us they were all Egyptians. They all kind of bound together. They all felt very strongly that Sisi was in the right now.
All right, so then on the other side of that, the Morsi supporters, are they strictly members of the Muslim Brotherhood, his party? Is there a wider rejection, though, of the military rule?
There have been some people that have seeped over to that side. I mean, they are largely kind of Islamists. They are largely Muslim Brotherhood supporters. They've been camped out in kind of this main square in Cairo for the last 3 weeks. But we did talk to some people today that said, hey, I'm not a Muslim Brotherhood supporter. I am not a diehard Islamist, but I reject this military coup. I want our democratically elected president back in.
So obviously we know that with the buildup when Morsi was deposed by the military, and obviously that his interim president put in from that Supreme Court judge, a lot of uncertainty was in place then for the timeline, for the series of events for holding the next democratic elections. What do we know then for the interim government passing power back to democratically elected parliament and president?
So we think in about 6 months. The interim authorities' roadmap foresees elections for a new parliament by early next year. But at this point, we expect that timeline actually to be sped up a little bit due to the kind of rising and increasingly tense atmosphere in Cairo. But we're looking at about 6 months, I think.
On the broader picture then, obviously the Muslim Brotherhood wants Morsi released. What else are they asking for? Are they asking for further representation? Because clearly, when they won a little bit better than 51% of the votes, they felt as if that was fair representation. Now, though, the situation has certainly changed.
There's a tremendous feeling that there's an increasing crackdown against all Muslim Brotherhood thoughts, ideas, representation, and they're afraid they're going to be not only completely cut out of a future government, but completely kind of cut out of society. And I think not only do they want him released, they want him reinstated in the presidency. I don't think anyone thinks that's going to happen at this point. They feel like they've gone to the ballot box, they had done what civilized democracies are supposed to do, and now they feel like they're being seriously punished. So they want kind of a order of the democratic system, the democratic society that they had bought into.
Molly, stay with us. I want to bring in Dana Hughes from the State Department. Dana, tell me a little bit about the U.S. stance on this, because the U.S. has attempted to appear neutral on the situation, even though it has grown obviously in intensity. But what steps then has the U.S. government taken to back the military in Egypt?
Well, the United States, Dan, has finally said that they've made a determination as to whether what happened in Egypt is a coup or not. And that determination is that they actually haven't made a determination. And furthermore, legally, they've looked at it and they've said they don't have to make a determination. Now, basically, what senior administration officials are telling ABC News is that when they took a look 3 weeks ago as to whether the ouster of President Morsi, which was Egypt's first democratically elected president, constituted a military coup, which would mean that under U.S. foreign aid law, they would have to cut off the $1.6 billion that the United States gives to the Egyptian military. President Obama ordered a review, and now that they've looked at that, they've had lawyers look at it, and what they've determined is that they don't have to determine whether it was a coup at all. Now, members of Congress yesterday said that they may have a problem with this legal determination.
Is there anything then that's been brought up in these discussions about the review of the law there and the determination of the semantics of the use of the word coup? Is there any sticking point, or rather I should say, is there any tipping point, in fact, that the White House would withdraw that $1.6 billion in funding?
Yes, this really has to do with the fact that the White House and the administration has decided and has point blank said that they've decided that to withdraw funding from Egypt's military is actually not in U.S. national interest, that Egypt is a linchpin for stability in the region, and that the world and the United States simply cannot have Egypt fall into chaos.
So, Molly, I want to bring you back into this then, because obviously we see it here at the States, obviously as a very uncertain, unstable situation. But I'm wondering, from the people that you've spoken with on the ground there in Cairo, in Tahrir Square, how tuned in are they to the American policy, into the American politics, knowing that there's that kind of funding, both financially and politically, that could be in jeopardy coming from D.C.?
Certainly not to the extent that Dana just outlined. We asked people about this today, actually, and the rumor mill is alive and well. I think both sides right now are accusing the U.S. of conspiring with the other against them. And I don't think either side, at least the mass kind of majority of either side, understands exactly kind of what the U.S. is doing, kind of what back channels they're following. I think there's tremendous anger that they're not calling it a coup. I think that's a huge sticking point, and that is widely known and talked about. But I think there's anti-American sentiment right now is running at an all-time high on both sides. Today, I was telling Dana earlier, we saw huge signs of pictures of U.S. Ambassador Ann Patterson with a big X through her picture. We saw big signs saying, U.S. supported this military coup, or U.S. supported Morsi. It's not a good atmosphere right now. And I know that when Deputy Secretary of State Burns was there last week, it was a very tricky dance for him to do with both sides.
So, Molly, you're on the ground there, and Dana, I want to get your reaction to this question as well. But Molly, from what you're seeing, from where this country has come from in the past 2 years, with the army being in such tight control of what is happening right now, and since President Hosni Mubarak resigned, how much then really has changed in Egypt?
Well, Dan, not as much as both sides would like, that's for sure. Many of the same vocal revolutionaries are not yet satisfied. There have been a lot of changes in the last year or so under Morsi, but the military still holds a tremendous amount of power. And I think for most people, that is the kind of consistent complaint that hasn't changed, hasn't budged since Mubarak fell.
And Dana, I want to ask you then, what's the U.S. take on changes that have happened in the past 2 years in Egypt?
Well, it's interesting what Molly says about neither side being happy with the United States at the moment. The United States has had to walk this very fine line over the last 2 years, and you're seeing it really crystallized now, where they want to support democracy and they want to support the first democratically elected, leader of Egypt, but at the same time, stability is tantamount, and they've made that very clear. So on the one hand, you have this announcement that they are not going to call it a coup. They're not going to not call it a coup. And they don't know that they'll make a determination in the future. But at the same time, they also this week announced that they were going to be withholding a shipment of F-16s. And today, State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki made a very clear statement that they are deeply concerned with Morsi's continued detainment and the new charges that have reportedly been leveled against him. So they're trying to walk this fine line of appearing and trying to say that they support democratic processes, but yet support the stability in Egypt. And maybe it appears that they might not be making anybody happy.
The State Department, the White House, everyone watching as this situation is growing more intense. Dana Hughes at the State Department, thank you for that. And Molly Hunter on the ground in Cairo, thank you. And of course, stay safe as well. At least 2 people were killed in these clashes between pro and anti-Morsi supporters as the intensity is growing between those 2 conflicting groups in Cairo, Egypt. I'm Dan Kleffler in New York with this ABC News Digital Special Report.
This has been a special report from ABC News Digital.